So I'm going to start with ELA, and I'm going to start with the first shift. So the first shift in ELA is balancing informational and literary text. We know this. We hear a lot about this. And the thing to emphasize here is that this is not just about having equal-sized stacks of informational and literary text in our classrooms. This is really about thinking through how it is that we're going to teach students to access and make meaning out of informational text. This is a new skill for us as practitioners, and this is definitely a new skill for our students. Shift 2 in ELA is knowledge in the disciplines. So what we're thinking about here is how can students, in really P12, we started off calling this a 612 shift, but it really is a shift that exists in P12. How can we think about making sure that students are accessing knowledge, understanding the world through text? So it's much less about my charisma. It's much less about the stories that I tell. It's much less about the ways that I've learned to inform students about the sciences, about history, and it's much more about the ideas and the meanings and the history that they get out of what they read, and making sure that they are able to access that successfully. Shift number 3 is a staircase of complexity. So this is the big news. This is one of the big ahas in the Common Core State Standards. When we look at the Appendix B, it tells us that the way the complexity plays out is that you're looking at about a 2 to 3 year jump for most of the stuff we're used to reading. So for the seminal text that we tend to read in our classrooms, we are now looking at reading that level of complexity about 2 grades earlier. And the reality is that no matter how high performing the district, no matter how high performing the student, this is a challenge for everybody. Another part of that reality is that for low performing students right now who are struggling right now to read the stuff that's in front of them, this is an additional big jump. And it's a challenge. It's a tough challenge, and we are really needing to focus on what it means to unpack text, to chunk text, to read a heck of a lot less text, so that students are really able to make meaning out of what is appropriate for their grade level. One of the sort of sins of compassion that I certainly have committed in the past is constantly translating those grade level texts and giving students, quote, easier text to read, less complex text to read, so that they can get the meaning, so they can get the information, but never actually have to access that text that's too challenging for them. And that is a habit that we really have to break ourselves up in this new context. Shift number 4 is text-based answers. We also like to refer to this as evidence-based conversations about text. This is the big lift for us as practitioners. This is a sophisticated skill. We've all done it for moments at a time. Very, very, very few of us have done this for an entire lesson, for an entire class period, right? Very, very few of us are fluent and fluid with the idea and the practice of making sure that the conversations that students are having are based and relying upon the text that's in front of them. Where do you see it in the paragraph, in the sentence, in the word? Is it there? How do you know? Shift number 5 is writing from sources, which is that same practice played out in writing. So it is less of an emphasis on the narrative. We're not throwing the narrative out, but we are shifting to a place where what students are writing is based on what they are reading, and it is a discourse between that student and what is on the page. And finally, in ELA, we are talking about academic vocabulary. So this is the notion that students need transferable vocabulary that they can use across content areas and in increasingly complex contexts. One of the most important ways to pull this off is to make sure that students are reading increasingly complex text about the same stuff. So the more you read about sharks, the more you can read about sharks. All of our curriculum is based on that assumption, and it's important to know that this is why.